brother introduced me at his engagement party by saying, "And this is my little sister. She fixes toilets for a living." He said it with a smile. The kind of smile that's supposed to soften the blow but doesn't. He said it to a room full of his fiancée's family, lawyers, a property developer, 2 people who'd flown in from Connecticut, and he waited for the laugh. He got it. My mother was standing 3 feet away. She looked at her wine glass. "I want to tell you I said something sharp and perfect." I didn't. I smiled back and said, "Nice to meet everyone." And then I spent the next 40 minutes by the cheese board trying to look like I was exactly where I wanted to be. I run a plumbing and home repair business. I have 8 employees, a fleet of 3 vans, and a commercial contract with a property management company that keeps us booked 4 months out. I also do residential work because I like it. I like the problem solving. I like leaving someone's house better than I found it. I like the work. My brother is an attorney. My mother has worked in hospital administration for 30 years. My father retired early from a career in insurance and spends his days gardening and reading and occasionally writing letters to the local paper. He is 70 years old and healthy and sharp, and he has always been the quietest person in any room he's ever stood in. My brother's name is not important. What he does next is, the engagement party was in March. His fiancée, Deb, short for Deborah, though she hated the full name, had a family that was warm and loud and occasionally overwhelming in the way of people who hug everyone. They were fine. They were genuinely fine. The problem wasn't them. The problem was the way my brother worked a room like he was closing a deal. The way he touched Deb's elbow and steered her toward the right people. The way he talked about the house they were buying, a colonial in Westchester, 4 bedrooms, good school district, obviously, he said, even though neither of them had children yet. I noticed, too, that my father barely spoke all evening. He sat in a wingback chair near the window and accepted whatever people brought him, a plate of food, a glass of water, a brief conversation, and smiled at all of it. When I sat next to him for a while, he seemed glad, but also distant, the way people get when they're tired in a way that sleep won't fix. "You okay, Dad?" "Fine, sweetheart. Just a long drive." It was 45 minutes. He'd done it hundreds of times. I filed that away. 3 weeks later, my brother called me, not to apologize for the toilet comment. That ship had sailed, and we both knew it. He called to tell me that Dad had agreed to help them with the down payment on the house. He wanted to, my brother said immediately, before I'd asked anything. It was his idea. I said that was nice. "Mom knows," he added, another unprompted thing. I said, "Okay." After we hung up, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of a hardware supplier and thought about the word wanted, the way he'd used it, the speed of it. My father had a savings account, a pension, a small investment portfolio that a financial advisor named Gus had been managing for about 15 years. He also had equity in the house my parents had lived in for 32 years, the house with the garden and the workshop and the room that used to be mine. The down payment my brother was describing would have been somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000. Not nothing. I didn't say anything. Not then. I told myself it was none of my business and that Dad was a grown man who could do what he wanted with his own money. I went back to work. But I started paying closer attention. In April, I drove up to see my parents on a Saturday. My mother was out. Book club, she said in a text, and I spent a few hours with my father in the garden. He was himself mostly, funny, and a little distracted and interested in everything I was doing at work. He asked good questions. He remembered the name of the property management company I'd just signed with, even though I'd only mentioned it once, months ago. But at one point, I asked about Gus, the financial advisor, just casually, and my father paused and said, "Oh, we're not using Gus anymore." I asked why. "Your brother thought it was time for someone new, someone more current." He said it with a slight frown, like he was repeating words that hadn't fully settled into him yet. I asked who the new person was. My father couldn't remember the name. "One of your brother's contacts," he said. Very sharp, apparently. I nodded. I went back to pulling weeds, but I kept thinking about Gus, who had been managing my father's account since I was in high school, who sent Christmas cards, who had my father's cell number because my father had given it to him, and how strange it was that my brother had decided it was time for someone new. I didn't say any of this to my father. But when I got home, I called my friend Tamsin, who works in estate planning. I didn't tell her everything. I just described the situation in general terms and asked what she thought. Probably nothing, she said, but if your dad is making large financial decisions that seem out of character, it's worth understanding what documents are in place. POA, beneficiary designations, that kind of thing. I asked what I'd need to do to find that out. Talk to your dad directly, she said, or talk to his bank, or both. That weekend I asked my father as gently as I could whether he'd done anything recently with his will or his accounts. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't fully read. Your brother had me update a few things, he said. Just housekeeping. I asked what kind of things? Oh, estate stuff. He waved his hand. Then he looked at me a little more carefully. Why? I said I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. He seemed satisfied with that. But later when I was leaving, he caught my arm at the door. The financial person your brother recommended, he said quietly, I haven't met with her yet. Your brother has been handling the calls. I drove home thinking about that the entire way. My brother was handling the calls with my father's financial advisor. My brother had replaced Gus, who answered directly to my father, with someone my father hadn't even met yet. My brother had also received a large cash gift toward a house purchase, and my mother had, apparently, known, though she'd said nothing to me about any of it. I want to be clear about something. I am not a paranoid person. I don't look for problems. I have spent most of my adult life minding my own business and building something I'm proud of and staying out of family drama as much as possible. The toilet comment at the engagement party stung, but it wasn't new. My brother had been doing variations of that my whole life, and I had mostly made peace with it. This was different. This had the specific texture of something being carefully arranged. I called Tamsin again, and this time I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. When I finished, she said, Okay, you need to find out what documents your brother had your dad sign. I asked how. Does your dad have a relationship with his bank branch? He did. He'd been at the same branch for 20 years. He knew the branch manager by first name. Go with him, Tamsin said. Not for your brother's sake, for your dad's. Frame it as wanting to make sure everything is in order before the wedding. Banks are actually pretty good at flagging concerning patterns if you know how to ask. I thought about my father saying, your brother has been handling the calls, and the small frown when he couldn't remember the new advisor's name, and I picked up the phone and called him. I said I'd been thinking about estate planning for my own business, and would he want to take a drive together and maybe sit down with someone at his bank just to do a general review. He said that sounded sensible. He asked if I could come the following Thursday. I could. We went on Thursday morning. My father's branch manager was a woman named, and she told me I could use her first name, Kay. She had been there 12 years and knew my father. When we sat down and he explained what we were there for, she was professional and pleasant and did not react. But when she pulled up his accounts, she went very still for just a moment. The kind of still that people who work in financial services develop when something requires composure. She excused herself. She came back with a colleague. What had happened laid out plainly over the previous 14 months. There had been a series of transfers out of my father's investment account, not enormous individual amounts, 2,000 here, 5,000 there, but they accumulated. There was also a new beneficiary designation on one of his life insurance policies that had been changed 8 months ago, and there was a line of credit that had been opened against the equity in the house. Something my father did not remember agreeing to. Did you authorize these? Kay asked my father carefully. My father looked at the papers for a long time. I signed things, he said finally. Your brother brought them. He said they were for the house. For processing. Kay looked at me. I looked at my father. Dad, I said as quietly as I could. How many things did you sign? He didn't know exactly. Several. Over several visits, my brother would come on a weekday when my mother was at work and bring paperwork and explain it, and my father would sign. He trusted his son. He is a man who trusts his children. I want to tell you that I held it together in that bank. I think I did. I sat with my father while Kay explained what steps were available to them and took notes and asked the right questions. I held my father's hand when he went quiet in a way that I had not seen from him before, A different quiet, not peaceful, something more like shock. In the car afterward, he asked me, "Did I do something wrong?" I said no. I said he hadn't done anything wrong. I trusted him, he said. Just that. I know. Over the next 3 weeks, Tamsin connected us with an elder law attorney named, she let me use her name too, Patricia. Not the Patricia from any of my brother's connections. Someone Tamsin had worked with for years. Patricia reviewed everything. The line of credit was real and legally executed, the beneficiary change was real, the transfers were real. The question was whether my father had signed under undue influence, which is a legal standard that requires documentation, and often, Patricia said carefully, a willingness to pursue. "What does that mean?" my father asked. "It means this only goes anywhere if you want it to," Patricia said. "I can help you, but you have to decide." He was quiet for a moment. My mother was sitting next to him. She had cried twice during the meeting, once when the line of credit number appeared on Patricia's document, and once when she realized how many weeks this had been going on without her knowing. "He's my son," my father said. "I know," Patricia said, "but what he did—" My father stopped. He looked at his hands. He took advantage of the fact that I trust him. He knew I'd sign if he said it was fine. He looked up. "That's not something I can just set aside." He said yes. He wanted to pursue it. I won't describe every step of what came after because some of it is still ongoing and some of it belongs to my parents, not to me. What I can tell you is this: the line of credit was frozen, the investment account was reviewed, and a formal complaint filed. The beneficiary change was contested. My brother, when he was notified, called my mother first and then called me and said I had destroyed the family and that I had always resented him, and this was about the plumbing business comment, and he knew it. I said it was about Dad. He hung up. The engagement party feels far away now. The Colonial in Westchester, the good school district, the table full of people laughing at a joke about toilets. My brother standing there with his glass raised and his smile exactly right. I think about my father in the wingback chair by the window that night, how quiet he was, how I noticed and said nothing and told myself it was a long drive. I am not a person who is easy with guilt. I carry it and I work with it and I try to be useful instead of sentimental. So I didn't spend a lot of time asking myself why I hadn't moved sooner. What I did instead was help my father go through every document he'd signed in the past 2 years and sit with him while Patricia explained his options and drive my mother to her own attorney appointment because she needed someone there and she didn't want to ask my brother. My father asked me once, near the end of one of those long days, how I had known something was wrong. I thought about it honestly. "You couldn't remember the new advisor's name," I said, "and you said he was handling the calls." My father nodded slowly. "You raised me to know that people who handle things on your behalf without telling you are handling things for their own benefit," I said. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "I taught you that? You did." He was quiet. Then I suppose I forgot to apply it. He said it without bitterness, which I think is the most painful version of that sentence, when a person is disappointed in themselves and can't even be angry about it. I drove home that night thinking about all the things I had filed away over the years. The way my brother smiled when he needed something. The way he'd always known which version of a room to perform for. The way he had introduced me at his engagement party. Not out of carelessness, I understand now, but because a sister who fixes toilets is easier to dismiss. Easier to keep at the edges of a situation you are carefully building in the center. He didn't know I was watching. He never thought to check. I want to say one more thing, and I mean it plainly, without drama. I am not the villain of my brother's version of this story. I know what that version says, that I was jealous, that I resented his success, that I weaponized my father's confusion to settle old scores. I know that version because he's told it to our cousins, to Deb's family, to the few mutual friends who still take his calls. But I also know this. My father got his accounts reviewed. The line of credit is frozen. The money that was transferred, most of it is being recovered through a process that Patricia is managing and that I am not going to describe in detail because it is not complete. My mother sleeps through the night again, My father is back in the garden. Last week, he called me to say that the roses he'd been struggling with for 3 years had finally bloomed. He wanted me to know. He described each one. I sat in my truck in a client's driveway and listened to him describe roses for 10 minutes. That's the whole story. That's all of it. My brother introduced me as the sister who fixes toilets. He wasn't wrong. I do fix things. I show up, I look at the problem honestly, I figure out what's broken and where, and I do the work to make it right. He never thought to be afraid of that. There's a version of this story where I do nothing, where I file away the wrong details, the quiet at the party, the frown when Dad couldn't remember the advisor's name, and I tell myself it's not my place. That version exists. I almost lived it. What stopped me wasn't instinct, exactly. It was something simpler. I was raised to look at things honestly. My father taught me that, not in one conversation, but over a whole childhood of watching him. The way he fixed what was broken in the house himself before calling anyone. The way he read a contract before signing it. The way he never let embarrassment stop him from asking a question he didn't know the answer to. He was methodical and careful, and he trusted people he had reason to trust. That's what my brother understood and used, not my father's weakness. My father doesn't have many weaknesses. He used my father's integrity against him. The thing that made my father sign those papers wasn't confusion or frailty. It was love. He believed his son was handling things on his behalf. He signed because he trusted. I think about that a lot, the way integrity can be the exact thing someone exploits when they don't have any of their own. There's something almost efficient about it. If you know someone will always act in good faith, you can structure everything around that certainty and take what you want while they're busy being decent. But here's what that kind of thinking always misses. It only works as long as no one is watching, and the people you dismiss earliest are the ones who end up watching closest. My brother spent years making sure I understood my place in the family's estimation. The jokes, the introductions, the slow accumulation of moments designed to communicate that I was less than background, not worth accounting for. It worked, in a way. I stayed out of things, kept to my own lane, built my business quietly, and didn't make noise about it. What he didn't understand is that being dismissed teaches you something. It teaches you to observe without being observed. It teaches you to notice the details that people performing for a room don't think to manage. I wasn't at that engagement party trying to impress anyone. I was just there. And because I had nothing to prove, I was free to pay attention. Intelligence isn't about credentials or titles or the size of your office. It's about what you do with what you see. My brother had access to the same information I did. He knew our father better than almost anyone, and he used that knowledge to take. I used the same knowledge to protect. That choice is the whole difference between them. My father said something to me near the end of one of those long days with Patricia, when he was tired and a little defeated and trying to make sense of what had happened. He said, "I should have caught this myself." I told him that was the wrong way to look at it, that people who build things, careers, families, trust, are not the same as people who look for gaps in those things to slip through. You don't become a person of integrity by practicing suspicion. And it is not a moral failure to be deceived by someone who made it their purpose to deceive you. What matters is what you do when you find out. My father found out. He sat in Patricia's office, and he made the harder choice. Not to protect himself from embarrassment, not to keep the peace, but to say plainly, "This was wrong, and I want it made right." That took more courage than anything I did. I just drove and made calls and asked questions. He had to decide to hold his own son accountable. I think that's what I'll carry the longest from all of this. Not the satisfaction of being right, though I won't pretend that wasn't there. But the image of my father in that chair deciding, choosing honesty over comfort, even when it cost him something that couldn't be replaced. The roses bloomed. He's in the garden. That's enough.